From the studios of KENW on the campus of Eastern New Mexico University, it's You Should Know, featuring the people and events of Eastern New Mexico and West Texas.
Welcome to You Should Know. I'm your host, Evelyn Ledbetter, and today we have the pleasure of having Dr. John Petrone. He is an Associate Professor of Education Administration here at Eastern, and also a bit of a interesting hobby that he has on the side. So, Dr. Petrone, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
You've been part of the. We'll get to the sharking. That's the hobby. But tell me a little bit about you and your background.
Well, I've kind of had a circuitous route to get where I am here today, but I had a second life before academics. I joined the Air Force right out of high school. I worked in the family restaurant in New York for many years, did every job in the restaurant except for wait tables, even bartended for a couple of years. But when I got out of the service, I worked for Grumman Aircraft, building airplanes for a while. And then I ended up getting a job, I guess the equivalent here would be like New Mexico Department of Transportation, building roads and
Really?
cleaning drainages, and I mean, a lot of backbreaking manual labor. And then, unfortunately, my dad died suddenly, and that changed the path. I still worked for the highway department for about a year or two after he passed. And then it was kind of interesting. I was sitting at the table with my mom, and she goes, "You know, your father always wanted you to go to college." And I said, "Well, why didn't he say anything?" You know, she said, "You know how he was. You find your own path." And that really started, that never left my craw, if you will. And finally, one day I walked into my supervisor's office and said, "I'm giving you 2 weeks' notice," packed up the car and drove to California and slept on my sister's couch and enrolled in college.
Wow, that was a 180.
Yes, big time. I mean, I was older, I was a non-traditional student, but then once I got bit by the academic bug, I just kept going. And I think Greg Metzger, when he was here, alluded to it. We were both figuring out what we were going to do with our education, and then I decided, let me get into become a teacher, because my undergrad degree was in political science and history.
Okay.
And so I went to grad school in New York and got my New York State teaching license, and taught for a year at a high school in New York. And then my sisters, I had 3 sisters and a mother that lived in California at the time. They kept bugging me to move out there. And I found out that New York and California had reciprocity as far as their licensure.
Very nice.
So I did it again. I packed up my car and drove to California, and I got a job in a Central Valley high school, and I taught social science, all the social sciences. I taught U.S. government, economics, world history, and all the AP courses. And then I coached football for a few years and track and field for a few years. I got my master's, and after several years of teaching, I went over to the dark side, and I became a high school principal, and I was a high school principal for 10 years.
I had never heard that called the dark side.
That's a private joke amongst educators, is going over to the admin side.
Versus with the teaching side.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So anyway, I became a principal, and I did that for 10 years, and during that time, I earned my doctorate, and I got my doctorate from Drexel University, and in education, leadership and management. And after 10 years of being a principal, and all that entails,
and being loved by all, or not.
Yeah, we'll save that for another interview. Anyway, I kind of missed the classroom, and since I had my doctorate, I decided to get back into higher ed, and I was going to have scheduled face-to-face interviews with 3 different universities, including ENMU. ENMU was the first to fly me out for the face-to-face portion. And literally, I was about to go to Florida to interview with another university, but I was leaving here, heading for Lubbock Airport, and the dean of the College of Education called me in the car and said, "We'd like to offer you the position."
Hey.
So I figured I got the job, I might as well take it, and I've been here ever since.
Well, very nice. And you came to Eastern what year?
August of 2018.
Okay. So, well, we started here in the same time. So
Oh,
we both,
okay.
yeah, we kind of did the same thing. I did the accounting and did a 180 to
Different
this.
world.
Yeah, I did. So, but home originally was New York State.
I was born in Huntington, Long Island, and raised in the hamlet of Fort Salonga, Long Island. And I lived there for almost 28 years. So I was surrounded by water. Long Island Sound was literally 2 or 3 miles to the north, and the Atlantic Ocean was about 10 miles to the south.
And to think you wound up in the middle of a desert,
Right.
that's pretty crazy.
I get that question a lot. How did you end up in Portales?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But lucky for us, and sounds like it must be a good fit, you're still here. So,
I'm enjoying myself.
well, you brought in a team. This is really cool. The SOFO team that we had our interview with, and that is actually the South Fork Natural History Museum and Nature Center. But it's actually some friends that came from that time. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So when I was earning my bachelor's degree in political science and history, because I was a non-traditional student, they put me in a dormitory, but they gave me my own room, and I had some administrative jobs they let me do in enrollment services and things like that. But they put me in the honors dorm, and all undergrad, and 99% of the students in that dorm were marine science biology students. And I was the only political science history student in the dormitory. But even though I was a little bit older than them, really hit it off great with all of them, and especially Greg and Toby and Frank Quevedo, who's the executive director of the museum. And we stayed friends. And Greg started getting interested more in saltwater fishing, and he was always looking for people to go out with him. And me being the only one, ironically, of that whole group that was from Long Island, I would go out with him any chance I got. And we were a little reckless at times. He had a little 17.5-foot center console boat, and when the weather was conducive to going far out, we would.
A little further.
Way out.
Way out. And was he already, were you catch and release on sharks, or what was he,
We
what
were
were y'all catching?
fishing for anything that was out there. And
just
sharks
enjoying
were
life.
part of it. We were catching all kinds of things. He was in the beginning stages of figuring out the science of fishing, basically, and I had fished a lot in my lifetime, but never like that. So we kind of learned together how to fish the Atlantic Ocean, which is a little different than fishing ponds and freshwater.
Very different.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and that was interesting because through that, Dr. Bradley Peterson and then Dr. Toby Curtis, right?
Correct.
All started different areas of that research. Greg did a lot of the catching, and that's where you came in. But
Right. So it kind of evolved into what it is today. Again, just friends from college that started to do a lot of fishing, and Greg, as Greg explained during their presentation, Toby had said, the data is showing that there might be a baby great white nursery off the New York Bight. And Greg is like, you're kidding me. It had never been discovered there before. So he said that there's a lot of anecdotal evidence coming back from fishermen and things like that they're getting baby whites. So that's when it really started in earnest, because you have to have at least 3 years of data to be able to publish and have it dedicated that, yes, this is a nursery. And that's exactly what they did. And Greg caught quite a few baby whites during those 3 years, and Toby was the lead author, and it was established the first one in the Atlantic of a baby great white nursery.
And I didn't realize that the nurseries are actually just something that come about naturally. That if they have food supply, if they have the right temperature, it's protected away from the bigger species.
Correct.
And then it makes that natural habitat. And who would have thought that the show that came out on Nat Geo, the baby sharks in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought when I before the guys came here, I thought it was just kind of an entertainment type cartoon. And then when I watched it, it's these guys with their research.
No, this is real science.
That there's truly shark nurseries right there off of the coast of New York.
And as Brad alluded to when he was here, they're on the cusp of writing a new paper where they are going to probably establish the fact that there's a dusky shark nursery there as well. And I don't know if you saw the photo of Greg holding the shark and me wearing the ENMU shirt and giving the thumbs up.
I did.
That was the 100th juvenile dusky shark that we had caught, and that was a record, a scientific record. And I caught it, and
there you go.
Greg worked it up, and then we released it back into the ocean. But that was a scientific first. And the fact that we've caught so many juvenile duskies, the evidence is pretty. It's pretty established that once they write the paper, I'm sure they're going to be accepted that there's another nursery there.
That's just too phenomenal. I mean, right, literally in your backyard, right there.
Right, and duskies and white sharks are protected species, and the duskies were almost wiped out in the 70s. So it's important.
From
commercial overfishing, and unfortunately.
Right. Well, and just so the opportunity, you started working with them, and then after when this started coming about, I didn't realize the level that these gentlemen are at on their research.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just top notch.
Well, they're world renowned.
They are.
In their field. And if you go to the SOFO Sharks page under media, you can see Greg, anytime there's a negative interaction, which is, i.e., a shark bite of a human, they call Greg.
Right.
Or somebody from the program, Frank, Brad, and ask them to comment. And so there's plenty of interviews of Greg on Good Morning America and the local news, national news, of Greg explaining this is why this happened. No, Jaws is not out there actively looking to eat people. It doesn't work that way. So there's a lot of education that goes on. They talked about the Shark Shack that they established, and they go to public beaches, and he brings his students, and they answer any question you have about sharks. And so there's a big education component to it.
Well, and I think during that interview, he talked about, just being aware of your surroundings. If there's if the school of fish are out there and you have birds and dolphins and...
It's not smart to go swimming in the middle of a bait pod.
Right. He talked about when you guys fish and it's frozen, chopped up fish called a
bucket,
chumsicle.
Yeah, chumsicle, yes.
A chumsicle. And if you're in that, you're part of the bait when you're swimming. So just being aware, not going swimming early morning, late night, just being aware.
If the bait's there and it's plentiful, the predators are underneath them or on the sides.
Right.
And if you're swimming in the middle of them, chances are increased for a negative interaction.
It's not so much they're being after you. You just happen to be right in there in their environment.
You're in the way of their food.
So when you got the idea to have these gentlemen come here to campus, what brought that about?
Basically at the end of my stay every summer, we sit around, talk about what we accomplished and how many sharks. We keep a tally.
Because you go out there in the summer. Still, we didn't talk about that.
I spend about 3 weeks every summer in July. And we keep a tally board of the species of sharks we catch. And we sit around like the last couple of nights and they talk about, well, what are we going to do in the off season? Who's going to be writing topics for research papers, presentations because they present quite a few places. So this past summer, I asked Greg, I said, well, why don't you come to ENMU? And he said, why not? And I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, let me talk to Toby and Brad. And they all said, absolutely, if you can arrange it. So I was on a mission at that point. And when I got back to campus, I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Lorenz and pitched the idea to him. And he graciously accepted the idea. And we invited them officially. And that's how it happened.
Well, and then the goals when they were here, just education, or what were your, or I guess your goals were probably quite a bit different than
because of the
theirs, wasn't
demographics of our area and our university. I mean, we're an HSI, a Hispanic Serving Institution. We have a high level of socioeconomically disadvantaged students. I would imagine a lot of our students have never been out on the ocean. So the idea of shark research, I'm sure, was intriguing. I thought would be intriguing to a lot of them. Just look at the popularity of Shark Week and those kinds of things on Nat Geo. People go crazy for that, and it's. I was like, I think this could be really an opportunity to educate the community, high school, college, and citizens in real shark science done by world-renowned researchers. That's not hyped up on, the Discovery Channel. It's real, and like what you saw in Baby Sharks in the Sea. It's real science being done, and we're out there doing it every single day. And luckily, they put together a fantastic presentation, I think. And I don't know if you saw the email that went out, kind of a wrap of their visit. Several hundred people got to see the presentation, including over 300 high school
That's really
kids.
great.
And I've remarked to this already. What really, as an educator, that I was impressed with was the Q&A sessions after their presentations were almost as long as their presentation. That means you engaged your audience.
Right.
And high school kids,
If you put your cell phone down and you're asking questions, you're in the moment.
That is what blew me away, because I didn't expect that. I was pleasantly surprised, and most of the questions were fantastic, higher level questions.
Well, and they presented at the Clovis High School.
Clovis High School and Portales.
And then also here on campus
Correct.
at Eastern. Well, and I went to the one at the library, and the
Yes.
adults as much as the students and the younger kids that were there.
Yeah, it was
Super
a
involved.
packed house, and then I went on the YouTube channel just to see, and it said almost 90 people live streamed it. So
that's available where they can watch it.
Yes.
They go to Eastern's website, they can actually
if
watch that.
you just Google ENMU SOFO, their YouTube channel for ENMU will come up, and that presentation is there.
Well, they're so real. I mean, this is their passion, and so excited about it. And Dr. Peterson was interesting. He grew up in Nebraska.
Correct.
And he said, my waves were waves of corn. It wasn't the waves of the ocean. But
Right.
So that may hit someone here
Exactly.
that may decide to go do something different.
I knew it would resonate because Greg's story is similar. Upstate New York, where there's more cows than people in his county, he's not kidding. And Brad, again, from the middle of Nebraska. Like I said, ironically, I was the only one from an ocean environment. Even Toby, he was from the middle of Massachusetts, so most of his exposure was to freshwater river stream fishing.
That's exactly what came into my mind was, of all the ones, you're the one that was right there, and you left and went on another path, but something drew you back to it. And
Correct.
And you enjoy that. And you go fish with these guys
Every summer.
every summer.
For the last, before the program was even established.
And that's your vacation.
That is my vacation.
What? You just loved it. Tell me about that some.
Well, it's just people think I'm crazy because I don't take a traditional vacation because it is work at times.
In this picture, I love that you're rocking the ENMU. So.
Right, and as I mentioned prior, I'm fighting a thresher shark right there, and as Greg mentioned during the presentation, those are probably the most dangerous shark we catch because of their tails. Very dangerous, and they use it as a weapon.
Right.
And you don't want to be on the receiving end of those tails.
The way they flip that around
They
and
target
just
you, they
slice
try
you.
and swat you, and if you get hit with one of their tails, it'll knock you unconscious easily.
Well, and I think, was it Dr. Peterson that had really tasked you guys, like challenged you, 400 sharks to catch that one summer?
Right, the grant that it was a very aggressive number, and they've almost hit it already, and it's never been done by any other research team. The numbers of sharks that have been caught under this grant that Dr. Peterson's in charge of. So, Greg, he's stubborn, And when you challenge him, and we've just gotten better and better and better and identifying the areas where the sharks are and catching them. And I've done a few of the different jobs, but as I mentioned before, once you catch the animal, it's like a NASCAR pit crew. Everybody's got a job to do. I kind of evolved to be the angler, so I catch them.
You're the worker.
Yeah, well,
you're back to blend like on the road crew. You're back to working hard.
Yes. It's a lot of work, especially if you get a large animal. But even the young ones can give you a run for their money. And the purpose is you need to tire them out a little bit to safely work on them. So you have to let them run a little bit and then fight them to get back in. But once you secure them to the side of the boat, it's all business. It's all science.
And give us a quick review of what all they do once they get that shark to the side.
Once I get the shark where they can get Greg tail ropes it, and once it's tail roped, then I put the rod away, and then I grab the leader, hold its head so it doesn't turn around and bite them, and then everybody else does the science. So fin clips for DNA analysis, blood draws for blood analysis. They put in, depending on the fish species, they'll put on a satellite pop-up tag, an acoustic internal tag, or just an apex predator tag if it's a species that they're not studying at the time. And it all has to be done in a very short period of time. One of the tests we do on them that they don't like is a fecal swab. And then they take all the basic measurements, and then there's a person who records all the data on a NOAA data sheet. So they're measuring length, girth, things like that, and then the person doing the measuring calls it out. The person who's recording calls it back and makes sure that it's accurate, and then they write it down. Then you take water temperature. I mean, there's all kinds of different data and
it comes from
7 to 8 minutes is what we're looking to be done, and then we send them on their way.
Dr. Petrone, we're winding down, but tell me the best story you have about on the ocean with these guys.
Well, there's probably quite a few, but I would probably say when I caught that big thresher, that is, I would say that is the only time in all the years I've been fishing where I had to give up the pole after a while.
Just had fought it to the point you couldn't go.
I was exhausted.
Time frame? How long?
It was probably about 30, 40 minutes of fighting, and it just kept coming to the boat, running, and you have to get that line back, and you have to muscle it. And finally, after about 45 minutes, I said that I need a break.
Right. We need to keep this guy.
So one of my other buddies on the boat, he grabbed the rod from me, and we were able to muscle it to the side of the boat, and it was a big female thresher, and it was pretty impressive. But cool. Again, the one time that a shark actually defeated me.
Well, but at the end you had the backup crew, so it came through.
We're always prepared to do that anyway, depending on who's on the rod and reel. But that was a pretty memorable fight.
How fun! Do you think there's a chance that this team will come back in the future?
I'm sure they'd love to. They enjoyed themselves tremendously. They said the people were so friendly. They liked our campus. They said it was beautiful. So they really had a great time. I'm sure they would come back in a heartbeat if we would invite them back. And I would like to eventually maybe get something going with ENMU where we can get ENMU students out there.
Very nice.
I talked to Frank the other night, and they're trying to put something together where it's not just a shark thing. It's a kind of a coastal ecosystem experience where there's also some terrestrial components to it. So ornithology and turtles and a couple of few days on the ocean catching sharks. So maybe if we get the funding, it always comes down to funding.
Well, all of your effort is just greatly appreciated, and the opportunity is exciting to see where this may go.
It's just as exciting for me, just seeing everybody's reaction to
That's
see what I
really
do in
nice.
the summer. It's hard to describe unless you've been there.
Well, you can't get the smile off your face, so it's still there. Well, thank you so much for orchestrating all that and coming in to visit with us and do a little bit of follow-up today of your piece of that.
It
And
was absolutely my pleasure.
well, always nice to visit with you.
Likewise.
And for all of you watching, thank you, and we will see you next time. Cheers.